So last week on Friday was the 1 year anniversary of the Crunchyroll Funimation partnership. This was a move that no one was expecting and possibly even were blowing away some people's mind. This move was interesting because this made some things available. Certain shows that both kept streaming rights exclusively to themselves were now shared between each other. Funimation now had the opportunity to dub some shows that Crunchyroll had that no other licensor had probably picked up yet. And Funimation, from how it seemed, could help Crunchyroll with the home media releases on their stuff and share them and vice versa. Many were very interested in this move and were hoping to see where everything would go next. And the most interesting part of it all, that was just one of the first many things to come throughout the whole year of announcements. On January 12th of this year, Amazon had announced that they were going to launch their own anime service, Anime Strike. This was an announcement that no one was expecting as well because, well, everyone just thought that everything was a there goes stick in the mold, everything has been set type of motion. Because why else would anyone want to jump in on this streaming stuff, right? Another big contender that was rising out of nowhere was Netflix. Now, yes, Netflix had already been starting to license anime back in 2014 with the start of Descendeus, but they've more or less garnered attention last year, mainly starting with the airing of Ajin, and then moving onwards in the next couple of years, getting other things such as the prequel series of manga, Sinbad, Seven Deadly Sins, Blame, Gantz O, and most recently, Little Witch Academia. Now here we are a year later, and the anime scene for the States has been quite interesting. Both Anime Strike and Netflix have been met with heavy criticism. Taisei announced that on August 1st that they were terminating their services. In June, Section 23 Films had announced that they were ending their streaming services with the Anime Network online. And a new service from out of nowhere, High Dive, came in and grabbed the rights to stream their shows, which is currently in beta launch right now. All the while, Funimation and Crunchyroll are going strong as ever, which has placed us in an interesting spot with everything that has been. And I figured that today, why don't we look at where the overall results we have come to with some of these stuff. So some have hypothesized that Funimation and Crunchyroll, they're team up mainly because of, in whatever way they may have heard it, that Amazon and Netflix were jumping into the game of anime. And well, who can blame them? You're talking about two juggernauts within just, in a general sense that people are aware of, jumping into such a niche and obscure media that no one ever really thinks about. I mean, this ultimately put it in a position that Crunchyroll and Funimation had to think whether or not, for lack of a better phrasing, lose in this game. Luckily, if that's one way you want to look at it, both of them have been doing fine to this day. A lot of the choices that Amazon and Netflix have decided to do with their animes have been rather poor moves on their end. Both have their own major problems in what has happened. Anime Strike has an issue where there's this giant paywall that most people do not want to bother with, and Netflix is not handling the simulcasting matter of things very well, which has left a lot of anime fans annoyed. So I want to talk about these two issues that have popped up and where they ultimately affect things on certain ways. Which, first, let's tackle on Netflix. Understanding the issue that comes with Netflix sort of also has to evolve in the sense of how Netflix has been building themselves up over these very many years. Back in 2007, Netflix had barely launched their streaming services for everything they were licensing in the sense of movies, TV shows. Since this beforehand, they were acting more as a rental type of business before they decided to tackle streaming. Now this was something that really changed the dynamic in how people watch stuff because instead of having to rely on TV and possibly missing 1 week of an episode and not understanding what's going on depending on the type of show it is, and not having to now go out and rent stuff, being able to do it on the spot in your house, it was just a whole new wave of consuming media that people fell in love with. You fast forward a decade later, and Netflix, I think by default, reigns as the #1 streaming service out there, compared to many other things, so even like things from like HBO or Stars. And in the process of their development, they've also went on to create some of their own original products. The first being House of Cards. And the reception for that show was basically amazing. The show was very high. Like, a lot of people praised it. And so from there on out, when they keep making shows, they followed the structure that they've done. Now, this model structure of releasing things in bundles, and when I mean bundles, I mean when they make a show, they basically make all the episodes at first. That way when they release it, it's all done in one go. So all the episodes are there available to watch. This model is what they've been using for everything that they've done. Now, this isn't so much of an issue for TVs and movies that people here at least watch, but consuming anime is a little different. See, anime is more revolving around being up to date on everything, keeping up with the majorness of every show that's coming out, discussing the new episodes of whatever show you're going for, and ultimately not falling behind on things. Now, I have to imagine that this is something that has arisen just because of the fact that for every new season that we get, there's a new wave of anime, and there's only so many shows you can take over for once. When you add that along with whatever the busy life people usually have in their days, you ultimately get put in a position where everything has to be done here on spot. Before everything else happens, the new season rolls in and we move on, leaving behind the old season. And it's this style of watching anime that Netflix's structure is not very helpful for the anime stuff. When Netflix decides to hold on a show and then not release it until all is done, it kills any potential momentum a show can have. Because again, people only talk about stuff that's going on when they're going on. And the moment you miss it, you're sort of screwed out of luck. And this is, again, something that's very different from how anime work as opposed to TV shows work. And that's only because with anime, most of the time a show is only going to get maybe 1 or 2 seasons. As opposed to TV shows where that can potentially keep going on and people can talk about them as they go. So you have to be of the moment to catch those animes before it's ultimately done and you have to go. And I know that that's how it works as a fact, considering that back when Erased was airing, I didn't catch it around the time that it aired. And after it was all done, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I remember he brought up the race, and I mentioned, oh yeah, I have to sit down and watch that. Because I just hadn't done that at the time. Which then he responded with, oh, don't bother, you missed the hype chain already. And it's the style that ultimately doesn't benefit from it. And this is especially for some stuff that people have always looked forward to. Little Witch Academia had an issue where they only had released half of the show, but didn't release the other half. And people had to wait around for when the next half would come out. And this has had potentially affected Little Witch Academia in some degree. Now, yes, there are people who have still talked about it, but when you have on a general scale that people who wanted to watch it but just didn't have that option because Netflix just didn't allow that to happen, it becomes a little problematic. And that was something Little Witch Academia faced alone. One of the most recent anime, Kakakuguri, or Compulsive Gambler, had been announced to start airing in the summer, on July 1st. Now, this was an anime that caught all of people's attention, just because its presentation will theme the design. And a lot of people were looking forward to it. Except when it was heard that not only was Netflix licensing it, but wouldn't release it until next year of 2018, a lot of people got turned off. And ultimately, this is something that really is a very bad thing to do for an anime. As I said, relevancy of an anime is only for when it's airing and the little bit of where it goes on. Because the aftermath, aka once the show is done, is not the best possible moment of a time for an anime. Because any relevancy something to have can only be had if a show goes somewhere afterwards. As far as I'm concerned, Compulsive Gambler is not in any shape or form intended to have another season right now, or at least not have been announced or planned. But then again, I believe the show may still be airing, so I don't know whether or not that's going to eventually come up with anything. But still, when you're dealing with something where the aftermath is the worst time possible to deal with the show's handlement, you've killed any potential of a show having to be done. So the fact that Compulsive Gambler won't be getting a show released until next year, at least with an uncertain date, because outside of just saying 2018, Netflix hasn't said when, you run the issue that it's going to be a year later and no one's really going to be caring for this show, outside of the small few who do like the show. But again, you can't determine what the aftermath is. And you know, this is a face from some other stuff too. Fate Apocrypha also has been licensed by Netflix, and a lot of people have also been really upset about that. I know a lot of people have pointed out that in Japan, certain shows have been being released weekly there, and, you know, that everyone gets to actually watch them as they air along. But the thing I have to think about that is that I think Japan has a different team for their Netflix people. I'm not sure. I couldn't really find anything too major on that outside of just Netflix having different places all over the world. But if general matters of just different people helping establish things in different countries, I can imagine that Netflix does have something different going on in Japan while the West has what we have. And that seems to be what Netflix is facing with their lack of simulcasting. Amazon ends up being a different case. So, if you're not aware, Amazon has already had a streaming service, and then it got reformed into what is now Amazon Video. And Amazon Video, in some manner, is the same vein as Netflix, having licensed shows and movies for streaming, and also having their own exclusives. And this is a service they've had about 6 years now going. Now, the way that you were able to get to this stuff was that you needed to have Amazon Prime, a service that Amazon had included at some point. I forgot what year it was. I'll probably put like a year number somewhere here. That was meant to help benefit the people who use Amazon. And this is from different rangings of just saving shipping and just instant access to stuff. Now that's all fine and well, but when it comes to Anime Strike, there's another issue at play here. See, when I said that Amazon launched Anime Strike as a service, I mean that they literally added a whole new service for just exclusive anime shows. Which is not bad. I mean, it's good that they were able to isolate to say that we know that there's that audience, but the issue that stems from it is getting to it, the paywall. See, in order to get Amazon Strike, you have to sign up for Amazon Strike, which is like about $5 a month, I believe. Which is not bad. Some other services are like that. If not, maybe like $1 more expensive. The problem is that in order to even sign up for that, you need to already have Amazon Prime, and that service alone is $10 a month. And in order to ultimately come out the calculations, you're practically paying $160 for one whole year just to watch some anime. And even now, to this point, that price tag hasn't exactly been showing its worth. Right now, their library is generally small. It's much more bigger than when they first launched at the beginning of this year. But even right now, there hasn't been really anything worthwhile to go for. So ultimately, as it stands, there's no real major benefit in return if you go for this Anime Strike as it is. Which is a problem because, as Jeff from Mother's Basement pointed out, Amazon Strike isn't just trying to compete with other sites for pricing. It has to compete with the price of free, which is something I'm going to address later in this video. But for now, we're still focused a little on it, Anime Strike. And that's why, unfortunately, when people hear that an anime ends up on Amazon, they consider that it's gone to go die now. Now, luckily, there's a loophole for this for people outside the US at least. Since Anime Strike hasn't launched everywhere in the world yet that is available for Amazon, you can still watch all the anime on Amazon Video. So, if you happen to have it, or you just feel like checking them out, I say definitely go for it while it's as available as it is before it ends up getting stuck behind it all and it gets launched, the Anime Strike, in the countries. However, the biggest issue doesn't necessarily revolve around the animes or the services and what they are. The biggest issue I feel comes from just the company themselves. See, Netflix, by default at least, is the #1 streaming service out there. Nothing has rivaled it in regards to that. And as such, Netflix has been in a position where everything that they do, they're able to do it because, well, they just can. If they want to fund their own show, go ahead. If they want to go licensing things, why not? And because of that, their structure and how they've been built on can't be argued with. But because at the same time that structure fights against anime, you have the conflicting issue of the two. But, again, Netflix is so big that I'm pretty sure to them, the anime isn't even all that wild to even focus on. It just becomes another brand that they happen to have with them. And as for Amazon, in general, they're not even a streaming service in essence. They're an online retail store. They just happen to eventually get into the formation of streaming videos. And because of just what they stand as, what their status are, and where they're going, that becomes where I feel the issue arises with all this at the end. Because at the very end of the result, they cater to a general audience. Everything they do is what they just generally expect people to act as, without actually looking into the fundament of things, aka Netflix's style of bundling all their shows together and releasing them in one get-go, even though that's not how it works for anime. And for Amazon, seems to believe that the way that they were trying to approach this was they are under the assumption that people who watch anime were also the same vein that people watch TV. But because, again, as the digital media came in shifting how we perceive and consume things, that ends up holding really false. And creating that structure wall does not really push people wanting to go anywhere with that, and goes away from what they actually desire. Of course, the obvious solution to all this would be that people just need to make enough demands to these companies to be able to fix the structure of it all. However, because people are so preoccupied with their own lives and what they do, this is something that, by at least defaultly, a good half, I would say, just don't care to bother with this stuff. Which is why first impressions are very important, because if you don't present something good enough for people to go for, they won't bother with it. And for the people who do try to go for it, but then don't have the means for it, either give up or go with alternate route, which leads into the inevitable discussion of illegal sites. So, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I don't judge how one watches their stuff. Everyone's got their own reasons for what they do, and why they do it. I know that they aren't all good reasons, but reasons nonetheless. Personally though, I don't advocate for these sites. My personal reason for it is a little different than what the general consensus of what people go for. To make a statement matter for some stuff, the anime industry is having a very hard time right now as it is. Japan has been going through a lot ever since the crash in '08 with their market and the constant natural disasters they've been facing over the years. And this has affected the market of anime both behind the scenes, during the productions, and the after releases of stuff. Because when you have very low pay wages, not very helpful working conditions, lack of new people coming in, with the result of it mainly because schools seem to be shutting down for this type of field of work, anime is in a very trickle place that can't really bloom and flourish because of everything that's being held back on it. But the thing is that Japan focuses always on Japan. They are aware that they have an outside audience, but most of the time everything that they've ever done has always stuck strictly to their audience. They will always focus on their audience first and foremost to see what they want or where to go next with stuff. So the reason why I support for services such as Crunchyroll Funimation and the such is because it's there so I can help show recognition. My aim has always been first and foremost about exposing to help grow things as they goes. And as such, for sites from such matters as this, they're meant to help show that we actually do care about things. It's to help expose that, if Japan tried, there can be a market here for this stuff. That we can actually pitch and provide maybe just about the same results as a Japanese audience would for the media that it consumes. Now one could argue that, hey, wait a minute, we already have that type of marketing here. There are things going on for us here. While that is true, I feel that that's a little muddled in the whole shabacle of things. I have to think that one of the exposures of the internet comes in the sense that people are easily able to claim things, but leave it at that, and never being able to push forward. Now, of course, I know that not every fan's going to get so involved deeply that they bust out the whole room with, figurines, DVD collections, and all the like. But when everything is left as just, oh, I watched it, I liked it, it's not really enough to really say that that's going to be pushing anywhere. And this, in turn, again, is where the issue about the illegal sites go. Because watching there doesn't really benefit their side of the part, only our side of the part. Because we get to watch the show and boom, hey, good, watched it, fine, moving on. But when you're using a source that's not an agreed upon term between two different, groups, one side loses something in the end process, meaning that the original people can't tell whether or not something is going good or bad, only off of the numbers. And if the numbers are more dwindled than they would be if everyone actually went in and showed it was a bigger number, things get screwed over in the more bigger process unintentionally. If there's one thing people can't argue with, is that money influences the path of future. When we show that we're willing to put money into things, people always reconsider about how they approach matters and what they do. Now again, this is a major matter in the sense of what is presented and whether or not it's worth buying in or not. But this is sort of where another big thing comes into play. What I feel is the thing to look at here. Again, right now we're in a position where we have sort of a three-way weird relationship with things. There's us, the original Japanese companies, and the in-betweeners, aka licensors and the like, who have to handle messaging the relays and whatnot. And because if we want things to work out better in our favor, we have to give out our message as well to say what we want and do, which is what at least some YouTubers for anime have done, which is at least what some anime tubers have actually done. We exist in a relationship that has to be functional, that we have to all do our part, because just abandoning it because it wasn't favorable of ours doesn't really help anybody outside of just ourselves. But in the end, that's just us. We don't get much more available options anymore from there on out, which is something I hope that we can fix, because if we can make something that benefits us, benefits them, and benefits everybody in between, we can all win something. And I feel that in turn, we can even help Japan lessen the burden that they are facing with. Now, that's not to say that everything is bad with everything that's been available. Hulu seems to be doing the approach that Netflix should have done right from the get-go, releasing episodes that are airing in the weekly fashion that they are. And while they don't personally dub things themselves, or at least not that I think they're planning to do anything like that, they've at least worked out some deals with certain companies to be able to start airing stuff, such as My Hero Academia from Funimation. And oh boy, High Dive. Okay, I'm really looking forward to what High Dive ultimately goes with right now. As I said, Section 23 Films ended their streaming online services with the Anime Network, and have taken back everything that they've done. And this is where Hive Dive came into the picture. And so far, I've been impressed with their website. Now, I have a speculation as to why Sentai stuff is here with High Dive. See, Sentai sort of had this, what seems to be a rocky road when they've been trying to stream their stuff, from what at least I've seen and gathered for the matters. Jumping constantly from service to service, not necessarily ever getting anything going through. Now, of course, their most recent venture was, or at least how it seemed to be, was with Amazon. However, as I said, the backlash that Anime Strike got, I feel maybe send a message to Sentai in the sense that they probably don't want to be part of something that isn't really favorable in their end. Now, I don't know whether or not all those early titles that Amazon Strike picked up that were airing on their services were also part of Sentai. The only one I know that was licensed by Sentai was Arm Girls Mischievalism, but still, the essence that Anime Strike just wasn't doing so well, I feel that they may have reconsidered what they were doing for streaming services. And when the Anime Network just finished off their stuff for the streaming, that sort of left Sentai again in another area of just uncertainty. Then comes in High Dive. Let me just say, High Dive has been an overall better experience than with the Anime Network. I didn't use the Anime Network that much when I had discovered it, but for the most part, I really enjoy High Dive's overall build much more better than Anime Network. The user face is much more friendly to navigate through everything and just pops everything up on the go and just lists out things just a bit more better. They're actually keeping their shows updated as they're airing, and they actually put up the dubs for shows that for some reason the Anime Network just never put on, even though they had already existed for a couple of years at that point. Smaller things like the subtitles at the bottom, you can actually change how they're presented, whether they're white text or yellow text, and even in mixing and matching on how they're layered from yellow to white or white to yellow, depending on how the conversations people talk in the show go. And the most surprising thing to me, they actually have OVAs on their site. Why does that surprise me? So OVAs seem to be made where they want to fill in parts of the show that otherwise didn't get to be explored for the main series itself. Now, whether or not you want to consider these are canon, depending on the type of show it is and whether it's based on something or not, that doesn't detract away from the fact that a lot of these add to the viewing experience of the show. And this becomes very important because the only other site I know that had OVAs was Amazon Strike. But again, I wouldn't say that's another worthwhile to go for Anime Strike as it is. And in essence to other sites, with Funimation, of the couple of shows that I've seen on Funimation, sites alone, only about one of them that I had watched actually had the OVA as part of the episodes alone. Everything else was just the show, and if it had an OVA in it, I'm not aware. And the only other time that I have seen an OVA for a show that was from Funimation, back when they had still licensed it, was when I watched it on Netflix. That was in the olden days when Funimation had put a lot of their animes on Netflix for viewing. Which is a downer, because in a case like My Hero Academia, where there was the OVA of that, like, monster type of story, that little bit was a really fun episode, but Funimation just doesn't have it, which is sad. Now, I feel Crunchyroll might change that because their original show was an ONA, so they might feel to finally put on things. Because I remember when I was watching Bakemonogatari, I watched all the first season and got to the episode where technically the show ends for what is the first season, but the show previews stuff for coming up, which is where the OVAs came in, and they didn't have those. And you sort of needed them if you're going to move on to the next part, you say Monogatari. So I'm hoping that Crunchyroll maybe changes in the future with this. The only major downside so far I feel that High Dive has right now as it is that if you sign up for their services, 1080p isn't given to you defaultly, as you have to pay an extra $1 to get it on top of that service, which may sound bad, but I'm a little more lenient on that because their services are much more cheaper than I would have thought, actually rounding at $3.99, so basically like $4, and the extra $1 on that makes it $5, which again is at least $1 cheaper than some other services, so it ultimately doesn't really feel that bad. And hell, if you don't really care about differences of 1080 or 720s, $3.99 a month is your best option you got right now. Now, of course, I feel this might change though, because right now that $3.99 is not the definitive pricing and is only their current state, because again, they've only just launched a beta site for themselves and they're testing out kinks and whatnot. And I'm guessing that $3.99 is there to just sort of establish that should they come to be in helping fixing things, that they can use maybe some of that money to help manage their stuff a little bit more better. And that when the time comes where they finally make the official launch, that price might change to a different price, maybe like $1 expensive or more, and that they finally add the 1080 to that streaming option. I'm honestly just glad that Sentai Filmworks looks like they finally have a service that they can go for to provide their stuff after what seems to have been a long time of just ups and downs with their stuff. And hey, I gotta give it to High Dive for how they advertise for their premium membership on their YouTube channel. Also, I'm hoping Arm Craftsmanship Lizard ends up here. So again, it's been a little over a year since Crunchyroll and Funimation had their team up. We've been introduced to new sites. We've lost some sites. But I think ultimately, despite how I may have perceived everything in here, there's still something to look forward to. I don't think Funimation or Crunchyroll are going to be going anywhere anytime soon. They're going strong, and it looks like they're moving much more bigger into their worlds as they stand respectively. Crunchyroll is ever so blooming with their rise of things, such as hitting 1 million paid subscribers, and the very essence of their Crunchyroll Expo that they had just done not that long ago. And with Funimation being acquired by Sony Pictures, maybe they'll have a better hand marketing and distributions in other countries they've otherwise been unable to do so in the past. And if Sony happens to still linger on to the rights of some animes they used to hold back in the day, maybe Funimation can grab those and work on them too. No, seriously, do you know how hard it is to find a copy of Blood Plus right now? When it comes to Netflix anime strike, I still have hope for them. Netflix is sort of in a position where I'm intentionally find myself, because I've personally been a guy who's been patient enough to wait on things. But in order to keep things going along and smoothly for others, I do hope that they have a fix for that to actually start streaming things more directly. And for Anime Strike, I hope that from enough demand from people, they'll fix it so that Anime Strike stands as its own service, that you can watch that without having to rely on another service that you may not even care for. And again, High Dive just looks very promising, and I'm hoping that they continue forward with fruition. Now, of course, these are issues that I do think that really just stem right now only in the US, as that's what most cases are for this stuff. But I'm hoping that at least while it's issues that happen here, they're resolved here so that when they push them forward to other places, what we've done here benefits for others when they go over there. I haven't really seen some of these other streaming services that I've seen before, such as Viewster or Anime Lab, albeit that those are meant for other countries per se, but I'm hoping that in good faith that they do well for what they stand for other countries, and that we don't lose them like Taisei did back in this year. But yeah, to the 1 year anniversary of the Crunchyroll Funimation team. So those are my thoughts. I'm hoping that I made things cleared out and that what I've explained does prove to something useful to you should you ever consider some of this stuff. I thank you for the time that you watched this video, and hopefully you've enjoyed it or maybe you learned something. So without further ado, I'm General Gemma, and this was Midnight Center. Good day, everyone.